Hello ladies and gentlemen. In this video I'm going to show you a couple of designs for fully reliable, compact, and lag-efficient storage for gold farms in Minecraft Bedrock Edition. Gold farms produce a lot of loot, and item filtering systems in Bedrock Edition can be unreliable for several reasons. I'm not going to go into the details of hopper reliability in this video, but I want to show a couple of systems that work and that keep your loot together in a satisfying way. The systems I've built here reduce lag by reducing the number of entities that exist at any one time. Everything comes through a single trident killer, and then particular hopper and filter layouts along with chest boats for filter grouping make the systems compact. The filter layouts and use of chest boats also makes the sorting fully reliable, and the systems include overflow protection on smelting swords in case you run out of furnace fuel while the farm is running. Now let me explain this in more detail. First, with regard to lag, the number of entities is the biggest cause of lag, not lighting updates, redstone changes, block updates, or hoppers processing items. And the best way to reduce the number of entities is to pick up items and experience orbs quickly. Quick killing is not a priority here because each pigman drops 3 experience orbs and up to 4 different item types. Also, there's no cap on portal spawns, so taking more time to transport the pigmen does not slow down the farm. The quickest way to pick up the items and XP is with a single trident killer, with a player standing next to it to grab the experience, and a hopper minecart underneath grabbing the items. The hopper minecart could straddle 4 hoppers, each moving items at a rate of 2.5 per second, or 9,000 per hour. That means hopper minecarts on hoppers can process 36,000 items per hour. Now that's about how much loot is dropped by 12,200 pigmen, if you use looting 3. And you can get that many pigmen from 2 portals being lit and broken every 8 game ticks. So that's why I've built all of these storage models with 2 portals. It's also possible to squeeze 2 hopper minecarts under a single trident killer, with each of the hopper minecarts straddling 4 hoppers. And I've done that with these systems on the right. A single full-speed trident killer will handle 12,000 pigmen with just 2 tridents that kill on 1 hit. And you can get 1 hit killing via impaling 5 if you have water in the trident killer, or if you don't have water, you can drop the pigmen to give them fall damage before they get hit by a trident. With regard to compactness, of course, a single trident killer keeps the loot together. After that, filtering the swords first lets us condense the burning or smelting operation. Taking out the swords first is also necessary to filter the rest of the items through a chest boat. The 24,000 pigmen model splits the sword filtering to 2 sides in order to have room for all of the filters and to bring the output back together in the center. In all of these designs, parallel filters keep item types together, whether they're filtering from parallel hopper pipes or from 1 or 2 chest boats. Reliability, as I've said, comes from the particular hopper and filter arrangement and use of chest boats. You may know that straight hopper pipes in Bedrock Edition are unreliable because the random update order can make items skip past filters. Now there are 2 ways to make hopper pipe filtering reliable. The first is by horizontal and vertical alternation. If a hopper above a filter hopper has to pull items down instead of having items pushed into it from the side, then items cannot skip past the filter hopper. The second way is by pulling from a common container. Items don't go out and multiple filters can pick from the pool of items coming in. A chest or hopper minecart allows up to 4 filters under it, and a chest boat allows up to 8. Of course, with this method you can only allow items that are going into the filters to get into the minecart or boat. And for a gold farm that means you need to pull out the swords first. With swords, there's another reliability issue if you're planning to burn them to get additional gold, and that is what happens if you run out of fuel. I've made 2 versions of each storage system, one to smelt swords and one to just trash them. But in the versions that smelt swords, I have set up a mechanism that allows swords to be trashed if they back up in the system. So that way, if you run out of fuel or if you have a random burst of swords, your filtering of other items will not get messed up. Before showing how to build some of these storage systems, I would like to give you a formula to calculate how much storage you actually need for a gold farm. It comes as a surprise to some players that a single line of hoppers with a filter for each item type may not handle the loot from a single portal farm. The first formula here assumes max size portals, which have a 23 by 23 frame. For smaller portals, you can multiply the length and width of the portal area inside of the frame to get the number of portal tiles. For difficulty, just plug in 1 for easy, 2 for normal, or 3 for hard. The clock speed is the frequency of your portal breaking clock in game ticks. Each repeater tick, comparator, or a torch inversion in the circuit would be 2 game ticks. Now the filter systems I'm showing in this video are for 2 or 4 portals running on an 8 game tick clock, which is the fastest that I can make stable. These need 4 or 8 hopper lines respectively. To build any of these storages, start with your favorite 2x2 trident killer. For 12,000 pigmen per hour, you'll want to waterlog a piston on the opposite side of the trident killer from where you plan to stand so that it pushes the experience orbs toward you. For 24,000 pigmen per hour, you'll be collecting experience orbs from underneath, but you need to waterlog pistons on opposite sides so that water is always pushing in one direction or the other. This is necessary to distribute items evenly between the 2 hopper minecarts. For the cascading 12,000 pigmen per hour storage, start by placing 4 hoppers 2 blocks below the trident killer. 2 hoppers should point out to one side, and the other 2 should point out to the opposite side. On top of these 4 hoppers, place 3 curved rails to make a curve, and place a hopper minecart on top of the curved rail. This positions the hopper minecart equally above all 4 hoppers to distribute the loot. If you plan to smelt swords, you'll need to place another hopper pointing outward coming off of each of these 4 center hoppers to make more space in the middle for the fuel delivery to the furnaces. For this demonstration, I'm going to be burning the swords, so we can go ahead and put a barrel after each hopper right here. After the first barrel, you'll continue to cascade the hopper line with a hopper under the barrel going into another barrel, and then a hopper under that pointing into another hopper. The final 2 filters in the line actually don't need to cascade because it takes at least 3 item types for skipping to happen. Now let's fill in the other lines. Now let's put in the unstackable filters under the center. So we'll start with the hopper pointing down and then a block against that. And we're going to build the tech rock style filter where the redstone goes up from the comparator. And this will allow us to keep the redstone separate from the filter next to it. So comparator reading the hopper, then redstone up over a solid block, glass block, and then a solid block with a torch on it, pointing to repeater into the block. That'll separate swords downward and allow the other items to flow to the side. Then we're going to build the stackable item filters right next to that coming down the cascade. So we need hoppers pointing outward toward where the comparators are going to be, and then hoppers pointing straight down underneath them to pull items down into chests. The first filter here is going to be an impulse SV filter, which we can then tile next to the tech rock filter, which is going to have a comparator block lower. And this allows us to put all of the redstone on the same level so that these filters don't interfere with each other, even though the hopper pipe is stepping down a block there. So there's the impulse SV filter with the torch, with the repeater and then the torch, and the tech rock filters will go the other way around with the torch on the back and then the repeater closer in to the filter hopper. With the redstone set up, it's just a matter of putting in the filter items, and I'm going to put gold ingots in the center, then gold nuggets in the center, and then ingots, and then rotten flesh. To finish this, we'll put the chests on the bottom and then repeat the same filter layout on the other 3 hopper lines. With the filters completed, we can now move on to the item burner for the swords. So to do this, we're going to put a barrel under one of the unstackable filters and then hoppers under the others pointing into that barrel, like this. So that'll bring all of the swords into one place. Then we need a hopper under the barrel pointing into a dropper. Now it's a little tricky to fit an auto dropper circuit here without having crosstalk with the filter lines. So you can see I've had a block there with a comparator then pointing into another block, and this allows us to put redstone next to a repeater that is not going to be interfered with. Then we need a sticky piston, and the sticky piston will push one observer into another whenever there is something in the dropper. So let me put a few items up here in the top from my inventory, unstackable items, and you can see the dropper spits them out the bottom. And they've been deleted by my world setup, but that's okay, I'll make new ones. To finish this off, just need a lava cauldron, and that way it will burn all the swords. For the chestboat-based filter system, we'll start again with 4 hoppers with a hopper minecart on top, but we're going to orient them the opposite way of the cascading. So 2 of the hoppers will point out toward the AFK spot and the other will point out to the back, like this. It's a little tricky to place blocks, that's why I'm having trouble with these rails in this version. Then on the AFK side of the hoppers, we're going to extend these 2 hopper lines out by 2 more. So like this with hoppers going outward. And then we're going to put wall blocks in the front of this, these hopper lines, and those will be used to align the chest boat when we get to that point. Over here on the hoppers pointing backwards, we want to attach droppers in order to pump the items back in the other direction. We need to lift them up, as you see I've done here with the dropper pointing up in order to send them back the right way. The reason we need to lift items up with the droppers here is that we need to have unstackable filters able to read off the side of these hoppers. So then you can put hoppers pointing into the wall blocks we placed a moment ago, and a dropper or barrel or something on top of that, and then a hopper line going to the back so that the droppers from the back will push items into this other hopper line. And then you have all 4 hopper lines sending loot to where the chest boat is going to be located. To power these droppers in the back, I'm going to use a burnout circuit that continually gets restarted by the trident killer itself. So that way it's a fast clock, items will never back up, and it will only run when the trident killer is turned on. So we have dust on top of 3 of the droppers, a torch there on the side that will cause a burnout, and then when we turn the trident killer on, you can see that that continually pulses. Before going on, I'd like to adjust these hopper lines at the front to take out those hoppers that are open where the player will be walking. I'd rather have them covered, so I'm going to drop them down a block here and use barrels rather than droppers to remind myself that those blocks aren't doing anything other than passively receiving items. Then we can put glass across the front to seal that off. Then it's time to add the unstackable filters. Now you could use the Tech Rock filter here, just like I did in the Cascading design, but I'm going to use a different one just so that it's more narrow and streamlined looking to fit with the way that all the loot goes out to one side. So I'm actually going to have torches to lock the hoppers that pull unstackables out, and I'm setting up for the comparators to read through those chains there. Each comparator will send a signal through 3 redstone dust that wrap around and then turn off the block, or power the block that has the torch on it to turn it off. So see the comparator reach through that hopper back there and then sends its signal around to turn off the torch. So that's what it'll look like on one side, and we can repeat on the other side. The sword burner here will be much the same as with the cascading filter system. You need an extra set of hoppers to pull the swords down from the unstackable filters and put them into a single dropper, and then an auto dropper circuit on the dropper to power it, and a lava cauldron to destroy the items. For the chest boat filters, we'll start by building a platform 3 blocks out and 4 blocks wide, starting from under the wall blocks that we placed that all the hoppers are pointing into. Then you can take out the middle of this platform, and we'll put our hoppers pointing into the blocks on the outside. We need 5 hoppers pointing out, so you can fill in the 6th spot with just any kind of block. We only need 5 filter hoppers because since we're bringing all the items into the chest boat, even though we have 4 hopper lines being filtered by unstackable filters, the total number of items is enough that you only need 2 filters for flesh, 2 for nuggets, and 1 for ingots. Now I'm going to use target block based filters. Here you could use another style if you prefer, as long as it allows for the items to come out straight vertical down. With the filter redstone built, I'm putting in the filtering items. And then once we have those in, we can place the chest boat on top. Now, I like to use trapdoors to align the chest boat against the walls. So place 2 trapdoors so that they can flip outward. Then you can place the chest boat on the trapdoors, and when you flip them both up, it will settle into the middle and will align itself. Then drive it into the wall to make sure that it's above all of the hoppers, and you can cover it with glass and it will be ready to go. So there is the chest boat based 12,000 pigmen per hour filter system. For the 24,000 pigmen per hour storage, we'll need to move items out to the side twice as fast. And we'll do that by having 2 hoppers going outward in a line. Then underneath the outer one, another hopper pointing outward. And above the block that one points into, a hopper pointing downward, like you see here. Then we need to repeat that 3 more times. I'm using wall blocks for those hoppers to point into on the outside because that's going to be where we are going to align a chest boat in a little while. Now with the hoppers laid out, you can place rails in 2 circles on top of the center hoppers like you see me doing here. On the inner parts of those circles, we'll need to place hopper minecarts catty corner from each other. So this positions each hopper minecart over 4 hoppers, and each hopper minecart is also under one of the blocks where pigmen are actually getting killed and dropping items. To extend the hopper lines further, we're going to build some blocks under the walls and then inward, and then have 2 hoppers pointing into them, and above those 2 hoppers, 2 pairs of hoppers pointing into each other. Now these hoppers pointing into each other are just to extend the flow of items downward, and that's necessary for the spacing of everything else. On the far side, away from the trident killer, we need to have droppers pointing up from the output and then out and back toward the trident killer into a hopper pipe that's going to wrap around 1 block higher than the lower hoppers. Where that hopper pipe wraps around, you see I have it pointing into a barrel, which then has another hopper under it to point down into those blocks that I placed toward the center. And that's where all 4 of these hopper lines are going to end up bringing items back into a chest boat for filtering in the middle. Now on the droppers on the outside, we need a clock circuit to power them. Make sure you place 2 dust, 1 over each of the droppers in the center, so that all of the droppers get activated. Then we can repeat this whole layout on the other side. And this will bring all of the items we want to filter back toward the center and allow the unstackables to be taken straight down on each side. Now we can go ahead and cover some of these hoppers with glass so nothing falls in, and we'll also place our chest boats on each side. Now these chest boats up here are not being used directly to filter, they're just to help extend the item flow outward in a way that lets enough items flow, like double hopper speed. We can cover the chest boats then with glass, so they're fully secure, nothing will disturb them. With the chest boats and the glass in place, we can now wire these dropper clock circuits to the central on-off switch for the trident killer so that everything can be turned on and off at once. So you see from the left, I brought 2 dust, then gone up by 1 glass, and then 2 more dust into another glass, and above that a solid block, which will have a torch on it that powers one of the blocks from the trident killer. So that right now shuts off both the trident killer and the dropper clock circuit on the left side. Next to that solid block in the center, I've got more dust. Next to that, another solid block with the torch under it there that is on a block that now has a lever on the bottom. And that lever on the bottom is down there where the AFK spot is going to be. So we can break the lever I had up directly on the trident killer, and now I've got one on-off switch for the trident killer and the dropper. So when I put that rail back, then it will all work properly. So it's all on now, all off now. You can turn it on and then off again. Let's now put on the unstackable filters. I'm going to use the TechRock filter again here to have the wiring be up as high as possible to keep it out of the way of things underneath. And we're going to need 8 of these, so I'll show the first pair here in regular time and then speed up the video for the other 6. Let's now put in the stackable item filters. The first step is going to replace these solid blocks I had in the middle for aiming hoppers with wall blocks, but we're going to leave out the center one. So we'll have 2 wall blocks on each side with a gap between them. Then down and out from those wall blocks, we're going to put a row of solid blocks, and once we have those in, we'll put filters pointing, or hoppers, which will become the filter hoppers, pointing into them on each side. We also want to have 2 hoppers at the center pointing outward in the direction away from the trident killer. These will be for the gold ingots. So then a hopper underneath each of these hoppers, again, to pull items down into the chests. Under the center 2 hoppers, we need barrels, and these are necessary for a small item filter. I'm going to call it a nip-tuck filter that I will wedge in here between the unstackable filters on the outside and the rest of these hoppers in the middle. So as you can see, I've got dust on glass pointing into the barrel, powered by a torch from a solid block that's to the side. Dust on that goes up to dust on glass, and then the comparator reading from the hopper in the center. So this little filter is of course not overflow proof, but it doesn't need to be because it's not next to anything else. It's redstone, doesn't touch anything else. Then on the outsides, or rather the front and back, I'm going to put 4 item filters. I'm using the target block based filter here, but you could use any style you prefer as long as it allows for the straight vertical alignment of the hoppers coming down, because they'll point down into chests and we don't have any room for anything to jut out. You can see now I'm putting all nuggets on one side of this set of filters and all rotten flesh on the other side, so 4 in a row on either side of the ingots. And it's important to do it that way because of the way I'm going to line the chest boats over the top. We need to have 2 flesh filters and 2 nugget filters and 1 ingot filter under each chest boat. To place the chest boats, we're first going to put down trap doors that will be able to flip upward to align the boats. And then you'll need to place the boat on the center, not too close to the walls of the outside or it'll glitch through the hoppers. You can then ride it toward the outside a little bit, at least enough to be able to interact with the trapdoor underneath. Once you flip up both trapdoors, you'll see this boat align. And then I'm going to ride it a little more to straighten it out, but the trapdoors and the wall blocks keep it aligned over the hoppers, so it will function even if it doesn't look like it's pointing the right way. Get the second boat in right there. And you'll see again, I flip the trapdoor up and it aligns it. Then I suggest putting stairs here for access to the AFK, and then you could build out like a slab floor over top of the item filters to cover those up and have an easy access if you want. Now above the chest boats, you'll need to do a trapdoor floor in order to have enough headroom. You can't do like slabs or anything like that there. But with the trapdoor floor, you can walk right in there, and that's where you'll stand to collect experience while the farm runs. So there is the 24,000 pigmen per hour farm storage. If you want to burn swords, you can add the burners underneath the same way I showed for the 12,000 pigmen per hour storage. If you want to smelt swords, then keep watching because I'm going to show that next. To build my overflow protected smelter on the 12,000 pigmen per hour model, we can start by removing the sword burner that I put on earlier in the tutorial. Then we're going to build down 2 blocks from the unstackable filters, and under those 2 blocks we will put our 5 blast furnaces and 1 dropper. Now the blast furnaces should extend outward, so they're going to be off center. They should be off center to the side of the nugget filters out front. If you want to pipe the nuggets from these furnaces back into the same chest that you have your filtered nuggets coming through. So we'll need the hoppers on top of the blast furnace and dropper, and then underneath the blast furnace, so the swords will go in, nuggets will come out. Under the dropper should be a lava cauldron for burning overflow swords. And then we can also put in hoppers pointing into the side of each of the blast furnaces for fuel. And I'm going ahead and filling in some of the glass blocks here that will support the rails for fuel delivery. Now, if you would like to pump your nuggets from the blast furnaces into the same chest that you're filtering nuggets into, then you can follow the next minute or so here. I'm building a little dropper tower that'll go right up to the top chest where nuggets are being filtered, and then extending the hoppers over to those droppers. And I'm going to put a little redstone mechanism on here that will ensure none back up in the droppers, and as each nugget comes through, the droppers will be activated and so they'll be sent up one at a time. Now for the dropper, we're going to put a solid block next to the hopper that is pointing into it, and then 2 blocks below another solid block, and dust down there, and then dust up next to the solid block that's next to the hopper. So this is going to be for a clock circuit that is out away, and that extra dust in there next to the dropper kind of extends the clock circuit. And this is just for the arrangement with some other wiring that I'm about to put in. Now this clock circuit that powers the dropper will be turned off by the torch just placed there. That torch then will be deactivated to allow the dropper to drop swords into lava by a redstone line that I'm going to run around in a circle, or technically a square, but sort of like a circle or spiral. So I'm running the redstone line around these blocks here so that it will depower that torch when the signal strength reaches 8 or higher. And we want it to be 8 or higher so that it only gets activated when the hopper that it's reading from, which I just am placing a solid block next to there, when that hopper gets 3 items, or 3 stacks, but 3 swords backed up in it. So I'm going to demonstrate that here. Right now, the dropper clock circuit is off, but if I put 3 unstackable items in this hopper, it will start to run. And that way, it allows for some fluctuation in the randomness of which hopper swords get pulled into. But if too many start to back up, then it will start to burn swords. And as the system runs out of fuel, if all the hoppers back up, then all of the swords will end up going to the dropper. Now we need to place our rails on here for the chest minecart to deliver fuel. And I'm going to power those rails with a torch up, or not a torch, a lever up here on a glass block. Now you could put a redstone block in that position if you want to, but of course a lever is cheaper. The rails will come around, and then we're going to put 4 more powered rails, turn the rail again, and on the outside put a detector rail that needs to go up at an angle like this. Then we can read that detector rail with a comparator on the other side of the block that it's leaning on. When a minecart goes up that detector rail, it'll get filled with fuel by the hoppers I just placed. And if the minecart is low on fuel, it will just stop to allow the hopper to fill it high enough that it gives off signal strength 2. So you can see that piston catches the hopper, or the chest minecart, and when it has enough fuel, it will let it go to deliver the fuel. Over here back on the inside, we can place our 2 wall blocks for alignment, and then the chest boat over these 6 hoppers. Now once you place this, if you want to ride it in and then get out, you'll be stuck inside the system, so you may need to break a couple of blocks to get out. And we also need to make sure that the powered rails on the outside here stay activated. So I'm going to put another lever on a glass block next to the other glass block so it doesn't interfere with anything else. And then step out, replace this part of the filter that I broke. So dust there, torch there, and there is our overflow proof smelter. The overflow proof smelter on the 24,000 pigmen per hour model is going to be much the same, a couple of tweaks to the redstone and a particular alignment. So we need to start with one of the outer unstackable filters and then build our blast furnaces and dropper outward from that. So you can see how I have the dropper directly under one of the outer and filters, and so these blast furnaces on the outside are actually 1 block further out from the center than that, and we need that much space to allow for fuel delivery without interfering or getting gummed up with the other filtering circuits in the middle. Now I'm building out right here the redstone that goes around in a square to be 8 blocks long. That's going to work much the same way, but instead of a repeater at the end of the line here, I'm going to go ahead and put a solid block and then a torch coming off the side of that and a solid block up to our dropper, dust on top of that block, which will then connect to a little roundabout clock circuit, like 3x2 flat one here. repeater pointing into that block there. So now that torch is still turning off the clock circuit, but also we're going to use a chain behind this comparator instead of a solid block. And we need to do those to keep the redstone away from the ingot filter. We do need the solid block right next to that ingot filter torch in order to bounce the minecart back from when it's delivering fuel, so that it goes in and comes out. But this time we're only going to put one powered rail there, and then we'll wrap these rails around, and then two powered rails here. Our detector rail can go right next to the chain, going up onto a solid block comparator to another block, and this lines up perfectly with the rest of the redstone support. And the same little mechanism here with the dust going up to a torch that's going to be next to a piston that'll hold the minecart when it's low on fuel to allow the hopper time to refill it. And we can power these two powered rails with a lever on a glass block next to that piston. And then on the inside here we put a glass block there. Oh wait, no, we don't want it there. We want it here and the lever there, so it'll be next to that other torch and not interfering with anything else. Now we can put the chest minecart and chest boat in place. So the chest minecart there behind the piston, and then to align the chest boat, we need it to extend over so that it's under all of the unstackable filters, but also sticks out to be over all 6 of these hoppers. So you can see I've placed 3 rails, and if I drive to the left a little bit going in, then when I exit I should be outside of the hoppers and not stuck inside there and having to break my way out. So there's the overflow proof smelter again, tweaked for my 24,000 pigmen per hour farm storage. You'll need to repeat that on the other side of this build, of course. I'll leave that to the viewer. Well, thanks for watching this far. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope that it helps you with your gold farms.